This is for when sentences are in English, and the Japanese character did not understand them.
Any words without the strange sounds are ones characters understood. If a scene is actually spoken in Japanese, I will translate directly after for the audience. If any part of the phrase is in English, it's because the English-speaking character understood them. There are also times where an English speaker may drop back into English, but that's because they don't know the word in Japanese.
This is for when an English character understands the Japanese that is being spoken, either because of translation device or because of their own ability to decode it.
This is Portal Panic, Chapter 4. Wednesday, September 5th, 7:20 a.m. Feelings of helplessness, headaches, irritability, fitful sleep, and constantly poring over an event to determine what you could have done differently. It sounds like what you're experiencing is a form of survivor's guilt. Hagakure-chan may still be alive. I do not believe I have that. Shoji sat tense upon the edge of a common green UA recliner, all parallel hands clasped together in 3 pairs of 2. Across from the boy sat a brand new member of the school's faculty, daintily perched on the arm of an identical chair, clipboard in hand and business suit tucked perfectly into place. Once just a consultant on retainer, Hikari Aguni now held a full-time position. Actually, that's a misnomer. Survivor's guilt is much more common than people realize, and also includes events in which loss of life is unknown, the petite lady explained. Then, after giving the stressed student a once-over and not liking what she saw, followed it up with, I'm going to activate my quirk so you can think through this logically with me. Is that okay? The brooding male nodded in affirmation at the mental health expert, keeping an intense gaze locked on the gray linoleum floors. Almost instantly, the Dupla hero's frown relaxed, and Shoji's clenched hands parted from each other, settling lightly onto dark blue slacks. Although it was not Aguni's profession, the psychiatrist was known as the Sunshine Hero by her patients, quirk instilling a sense of calm and warmth similar to lounging poolside. A lot of people go missing in our society. Kidnappings, runaways, natural disasters, unstable quirks manifesting, and collateral damage while subduing villains. A slender finger lifted with each new addition to the list. There are many reasons people left behind may experience survivor's guilt. It is even more common in heroes because of the sheer number of these kinds of events they encounter on a daily basis. Not to mention that they are expected to keep people safe. Losing someone, even to things outside of anyone's control, can feel like a personal failure. The woman tucked a string of wispy chestnut hair behind an ear and fixed Shoji with a sympathetic gaze. I'm here to help you recognize and learn coping skills to deal with anything you may be struggling with, including PTSD. A bright smile of encouragement lit up Hikari's face as Shoji finally looked up at her, the normally stoic boy's surprise visible despite his blue face mask. I am currently in charge of all first years and will be checking in with everyone on a regular basis. I even have open office hours now, and with a teacher's permission you can come see me at any point in the day. Basically, I'm a glorified nurse for psychic damage. The specialist winked at the gaming term, but kept the numerous studies showing a major correlation between survivor's guilt and suicide in heroes to herself. Wednesday, September 5th, 12:15 p.m. What? Aw, man. The whining came from an African-American roughly Dani's age. The young man on the half-his left shot a glare at him before collapsing dramatically into a pillowing of white-sleeved arms. The boy's multicolored beanie slid down at the motion, covering teal eyes in a pout. This is your fault. I didn't even want to take biochem. Feel free to choose from any of the topics on the board. You'll be in groups of 3 for this presentation, so find 2 other people you'd like to work with. An older female projected from the front of the room. With graying hair and less than perfect posture, the woman had to be at least late 50s. Sorry, Tuck. I have to take biochem this quarter while it's being offered. You could have taken the computer class with me, Dan answered, voice significantly quieter. The ghost kid glanced at the other male before his eyes darted back to the instructor. The lady had stopped speaking, assessing the class from behind thick glasses while waiting for any outbursts to settle. What? Be bored to tears and waste money? Hard pass. Tucker fully picked up a smartphone from where it lay on the desk in front of him and took a picture of the whiteboard behind the teacher. At least this way I'm only wasting money. The half-ghost took on a serious expression, catching his best friend's gaze. You know, I really appreciate you taking classes with me, right? I know you don't have to, with your business getting so popular, and... Dani, enough. If you keep up all this brotherly love, people are going to start shipping us. Tucker dismissed, fingers wiggling in a grossed-out way. His laughing smirk undermined the jibe as he stood at some cue from the teacher. Several groups had already started to form around the room while Dani had been distracted. Tucker power walked away, weaving between desks on his way from the back row to the front corner seats. A younger kid with wavy, shoulder-length hair seemed to be the techno-geek's target. The teen fidgeted in place, eyes just a bit too wide as they surveyed everyone nearby. Dani took off after, having to lengthen his stride to keep up with the much shorter Tucker. He nearly tripped when someone's foot happened to jut out into the aisle, but intangible toes turned what would have been a fall into a minor stumble. "Oh my gosh, sorry," the girl apologized, hazel eyes sincere. "Don't worry about it," Dani's head ducked as he backed away, hand automatically holding a tense trapezius. Tucker was already chatting up the timid male he'd cornered at the side of the classroom. A smugness tinged his smile and tone, ready to spill over like liquid held in a glass by service tension alone. "Hey, Dani, meet our third, Julian." Tucker snapped, finger ending the motion by staying pointed at Julian's semi-gaunt face, framed in hickory brown hair. "Hello, Dani. Thank you for allowing me to join your group." The H disappeared, and the R's rolled in an alveolar trill from the boy's heavy French accent. The extreme anxiety of the male now made a lot of sense. "Glad to have you." The disarming charm of a leader settled into place, and a lopsided smile pulled at the superhero's lips. "I doubt you'll be saying the same for us by the end of this, though. I don't even know what the citric acid cycle is." Rather than be unnerved, as would be expected, the French student merely sagged in relief. Wednesday, September 5th, 3:25 p.m. Well, today had been a bust. Toru had been keeping a dour mood tamped down, but like a banked fire, the dying embers of the emotion felt like they could reignite at any moment to consume and burn out her resilience. Many unforeseen problems had cropped up over the last 16 hours, starting in the night. Even with a thick, oversized men's jacket, found forgotten on a bench, a fleece-lined hoodie, plum-purple sweatpants, and heavy boots, it had been chilly. Covering both ends of her sleeping quarters with pine boughs had done little to retain the heat. Outside the tube, the temperature had dropped to just under 11 degrees Celsius, while inside hovered around 13. The moisture in the air also brought another problem. While the waterproofing on the jacket had mostly warded against dampness, the humidity and all the fleece-lined clothing combined to create a monster of static cling that left small pops of stimuli against the high schooler's body every time she moved. Needless to say, her sleep had been light, and it required intermittent bouts of exercise to happen at all. Long before the first child set hands upon the monkey bars, Hagakure had already left for the morning scout. The timing worked in the lost female's favor in that she didn't have to hide from many people. After an hour traffic had hit, there still hadn't been a lot of pedestrians. Face covered with a hood and hands tucked into a kangaroo pocket, Toru had been able to travel fully clothed. But as the morning had dragged on, being so tightly bundled had started to draw looks and slowed all progress to a crawl. Finally finding a map at a travel center's brochure stand, the UA student cried in relief, but the tears quickly turned to ones of frustration when Hagakure went to unfurl the cartographic paper. It was in English, of course. Tucking herself just inside an empty construction site to study the dang thing, she took a fortifying breath and got to work. There wasn't anything resembling a "you are here," so finally, after 10 minutes of searching, she found 3 candidate locations for her park. Then it was just a matter of comparing road names from nearby signs, with ones on the glossy paper, to rule out the extra possibilities. Next, she looked for hero agencies, but didn't see any. Only major public services seemed to be listed by special symbols on the legend. Ignoring the H of the hospitals, Toru looked for all instances of a blue badge with a P inside. Too bad there weren't any nearby. Doing the math internally, Hagakure calculated her current speed, then divided the distance she needed to travel by it. 3 hours to reach the nearest police station was a long time. That would mean arriving dangerously close to sunset in a strange part of town. This place was positively wonky. What country believed not having police boxes at normal intervals was a reasonable approach to public safety? Groaning, Hagakure tilted her head back in exasperation. A wave of dizziness caught the high schooler by surprise, and Toru braced herself on a steel beam. It was the second time she'd felt faint since waking up. The dumpster had only gifted her half a slice of cheese pizza the day before. Everything else had been a little too fuzzy to justify eating. Taking long, even breaths to dispel the vertigo, Hagakure waited for the world to stop spinning. No longer feeling like a drunken ship on a stormy sea, the woozy teen used the map to chart a new path towards her playground shelter. It was better to stay local to find a meal, and she just wasn't up for the trek to the police station. Getting to the park fully clothed took a while, but she managed. The embellished wrought iron gate of an unfamiliar entrance passed over Toru, and she consulted the map again. Following the leftmost running trail that wound through the public gardens, the haggard kid perked up when she saw a tiny, solitary building. Thank Kami-sama. The symbol for toilets was universal. Going number 2 in her little elm grove was something Hagakure could now avoid indefinitely. Feeling somewhat better after relieving herself, Toru freshened up, the cheap dehydrating antiseptic that came from the dispenser outlandishly pleasing to her nose. After disinfecting a series of shallow cuts, the girl washed her socks in the sink. Humming the tune to Tagami, she waited for the water to flush clear as soap suds rinsed down the drain with dried blood and dirt. The wool blend was then wrung out and held under the hand dryer, the metallic clink of a button sounding periodically. It was tempting to sleep here, but the cold cement floors and gag-inducing smell were too off-putting. Besides, people were more likely to come and go in a restroom. That was the same reason she hadn't stayed in any of the shops she'd come across, even though they were heated. Her playground felt safer being raised off the earth and having no reason for visitors in the night. Toru still had yet to see a single hero agency, and had a sinking suspicion she wasn't going to. It was partly why the girl was putting off going to the police. Something just wasn't right. The aspiring hero had seen more quirk users during today's excursions, and almost all had generated discomfort in the general public. A few people didn't seem bothered by the displays of power, most of them younger in age, but it wasn't the norm. Pushing back thoughts of doom and gloom, Hagakure's hands lifted, formed fists, then pumped down together. Yosh! Time to get some food. Nothing truly bad has happened yet, but a bit of sore feet and a crappy night's sleep. I can still do this. The self-encouragement echoed hollowly around the acoustic-friendly space. And yet, before she'd even stopped speaking, Toru was already getting ready to leave. I've got at least 2 more hours of light, which should give me plenty of time to look for a meal. Who knows? Maybe I'll find a hero while I'm out. You fall 7 times just to stand up 8, after all. The smile on the UA student's lips was strained, but without a reflection, the doubt could not stare back at her from the surface of a nearby mirror. Mood lifting through sheer force of will, the prep exited the bathroom and headed back to the street, determined to find the artery-clogging restaurant she had gotten a whiff of prior. Thursday, September 6th, 10:47 a.m. It was freezing today. If Hagakure gripped her coat any tighter, the lostling skin could practically meld with it. Toru was especially spiteful of the development, because not only was she incredibly tired from barely sleeping, but she finally had a lead. Ranging further from a park this morning had borne fruit, and it was obnoxious knowing she'd have to go clothes hunting again before she could follow up on it. Her emotions teetered back and forth between the extremes of furious and optimistic like the steady sway of a metronome's arm. Taking a breath, the waffling girl re-examined a brick building from her spot crouched between 2 bright red burning bush plants. The flower beds lining the front of the school gave a decent view of the handrailed steps leading up to the entrance, while still offering cover to hide in. As long as the sneak was still, nobody seemed to notice her, even with all the winter gear on. They were average teenagers Toru spied on, after all, who mostly stayed glued to their phones. What had caught her attention about this place was that just about every 6th student coming in and out of the olive green front doors had some kind of accessory with either a fancy English D or a glowing black and white individual on it. The pattern may have been attributed to the student body liking some movie character or a celebrity with a funky outfit, but she hoped it was because the person was a hero. Creeping slightly closer despite the risk, she sat down to wait. The patient hero in training stayed there nearly an hour, body numbing and falling asleep while learning nothing new. But finally, a lucky break hit when a pair of boys sat down on the closest concrete railing. One was a scrawny individual with light brown hair, absolutely decked out in the monochrome celebrity's paraphernalia. The other was a crew-cut blonde, more punk in nature, with jet black skinny jeans and an ivory skull on a crimson t-shirt. It was several minutes before anything noteworthy about them caught her attention, but then she heard a word that seemed to be repeating a lot in the last hour.
Did you hear what Phantom did last week?
The student who seemed to be a fan of the white-haired person tilted his head slightly to the side while addressing his fellow high schooler. The end of the sentence had lifted up, so it had to be a question.
No, what?
As soon as the apathetic denial finished leaving the second teen's mouth, his excitable friend was already clicking away on a smartphone and pulling up a video.
A delivery driver had a massive heart attack on his route, and Phantom stopped the van before it could crash. Then he took the guy straight to the hospital. The doctors claimed it was a miracle that the guy lived. If he had ridden in an ambulance, he'd be dead right now.
The few words she'd caught made Toru think the dyad was definitely talking about some kind of emergency, but she couldn't be sure. They could be chatting about something from the news, or explaining the plot to a movie. Both scenarios were equally likely, and she'd never know the difference. The brown-haired kid pressed play on his phone, the screen shaking slightly in overly thrilled hands. Toru could just see from behind the duo, watching them as it played.
Another good deed done by the local hero, Dani Phantom, caught on tape.
The voice came from a nasally ginger woman who looked more plastic than person. She sat at a gray desk holding papers. One hand let go and perfectly manicured fingers gestured to a green-screened image in the corner of the display.
Let's watch.
The frozen picture enlarged, filling the entire screen with a view from a street cam. Toru recognized the street, having walked down it just yesterday. A white van drove down Hudson Way, stopping periodically for a middle-aged man in a khaki uniform to clamber out of the driver's seat. The guy sporting a hefty gut and a distinctive handlebar mustache ran to various residential doors, leaving packages behind and scanning them with a handgun, a suburban parody of Santa Claus. The camera fast-forwarded through the postman's routine for 10 seconds, the guy ducking in and out of the van and delivering mail at high speeds, then slowed, focusing the audience's attention on a moment when the mustached male was driving. It soon became apparent why, because the guy slumped at the wheel, clutching his chest. The vehicle that was still moving forward listed to the side, almost hitting a parallel parked car before a jumpsuited person flew in front of it. Planting white boots on the ground, the quirk user grabbed the bumper in 2 places and forced the 5,000-pound automobile to an abrupt stop. Seconds later, the hero was wrenching open the delivery van's door. Pulling the driver out into a princess carry, he launched like a rocket into the sky, blue-collar worker clutched to his chest. Toru couldn't believe her eyes. There was a hero here, with both super strength and flight. She marveled at the genetically fortunate combination. The footage froze, and the peppy woman's voice from earlier talked over it.
You saw it here, folks. Phantom saves the day again. Now here's Shelly Makamoto at the hospital.
Thank you, Tiffany. I'm
Here awaiting an exclusive interview.
The clip cut off as the fanboy paused his device.
Everything after that is kind of boring, so I'm not going to make you watch it. But isn't Phantom just so cool?
That was definitely praise, and the reoccurring word Toru kept hearing was probably the hero's name. Yep,
he's real
awesome. The word still lacked enthusiasm, but it was obvious the punk-like teen was trying not to rain on his friend's parade any longer. Feeling like Uraraka had tagged her with zero gravity, the foreign-dimensional girl backed carefully away from the pair, a single word whispering from her lips. Phantomu. Thursday, September 6th, 11:08 a.m. The sky was a writhing swirl of emerald shadows, supporting iceberg-shaped land masses of violet and pewter. A mostly monochrome figure, except for its burgundy-red backpack, passed floating doors that drifted in no particular pattern throughout the zone. Seeing an island supporting an abundance of exotic fruiting plants and flowers, the ghost's lips raised in endearment, knowing he was close to his destination. Putting on a burst of speed, Dani Phantom plummeted straight down, flying through a corridor of twisting stairs and windows reminiscent of M.C. Escher's relativity lithograph. Shooting out the other side of the pocket wormhole, the Haffa came upon a massive building of traditional Scandinavian architecture. The house tiptoed the line of mansion and castle, impressive with its natural stone and mortar siding, elaborately carved archways of dark, rich wood, and a mighty turret to one side. The turf that made certain areas of the building's roof appear shaggy and unkempt had a strangely lavender luminescence. Dani knew the grass was for show, as the ghost inside generally didn't require the natural insulation it provided, but he had to admit it gave the building a more homely feel. Touching down amidst zone-variety daisies, tulips, and bachelor buttons, the white-haired male tipped forward as his flight cut out a smidgen too soon. Thinking little of it, Phantom inspected a courtyard enclosed by walls that doubled as additional living quarters. Most lairs gave off a feeling of beware, but not here. Never here. The very air welcomed, inviting all to kick up a wispy tail and stay a while. You made it. The words were all the warning Dani got before a skinny figure nearly bowled the male over in a hug. Not that I thought you wouldn't, just, well, I'm glad you're here. Dani's frosted white ghost form looked up at the taller half-ghost with azure eyes. Come on, I want you to meet everyone. The girl's change in attitude from a few days ago was apparent. A certain tenseness still pervaded Dani's frame, and the bags under her ethereal eyes hadn't disappeared, but the aura of haggard raccoon was now missing. Dani pulled at the older Phantom, forcing the 20-year-old to float into the house behind his female counterpart, tugged along like a balloon on a string. The guys he's here, that Dani called, was probably unnecessary as the two glided into a wooden-beamed lounge packed with undead. Dani barely caught a glance of the chevron and diamond-shaped carvings notched into the ceiling before he was accosted by greetings and swarmed with good intention. When a feathered cross between an owl and a house cat landed on Dani's head, kneading the boy's shoulder and trill purring like some squeaky chainsaw, a grin threatened to consume his face. Hello to you too, Griff. The little beast leaned hard into the white-gloved hand that reached up to scratch it beneath the chin. Turning to another, distinctly more humanoid face, Dani remarked, Lost Holm's mascot has gained a few pounds. Who's been overfeeding the little chonker? The half-his eyes twinkled as he watched Caleb squirm in place, a distinctly green tinge creeping up the young ghost's normally blue cheeks and pointed ears. A snort was heard from the snout of a lizard, and a gecko girl with an extra set of arms piped up. Told you to stop taking Griffin to visit Uncle Walker. Dani's smile dropped imperceptibly at the mention of the prison warden, but the boy didn't interrupt. She eats way too many ectoplasmic rodents when she goes. Sounds like she needs a radical change in diet, Dani couldn't help but remark. Only the newest member of the house giggled at the wordplay. Everyone else just groaned or rolled their eyes if they had them. The sound drew the punster's gaze to a little glowing magician. The kid sat on the twin tails of an overcoat, silky white gloved hands clasping a comically large wand like a cane in front of him. Phantom watched the child lean forward in his wingback chair, a white top hat completely covering the ghost's head. Or was the hat his head? Either way, no eyes looked back at Dani. You must be Luke. The kid sprung to lithe feet, twirling the wand to the side and bowing with a flair for dramatics. Luke my way, at your service, my lord. The words were said with a mocking flippancy. Dani grinned, liking him on the spot, then frowned when the boy collapsed back into the chair, winded, a puddle of green forming along the edges of his tailcoat where it met the upholstery. Dani was at the kid's side in an instant, reaching under the hat to feel at the boy's hidden neck. An octopus was fast behind, wrapping the younger ghost in a cocoon of tentacles that glowed neon lime. Luke seemed to stabilize, sucking back in on himself as the cephalopod's limbs lost their vibrant luster and darkened to a deeper jade. Thanks, Eggle, Luke rasped softly, all hint of mirth gone. The animalistic ghost bobbed in reply, worry etched across its face. Dani detached Griffin from his head and slipped off his backpack before rummaging around inside. Pulling out what looked to be a syringe with a satellite dish on top, Dani approached the fledgling ghost. Ecto-dejecto? Dani asked, disbelief in her voice. It can't be that easy, can it? You never know. It might be. Dani shrugged. I honestly might not have even thought of it if you hadn't been the one to come get me. It's been years since we've used it for anything. I even had to make up a whole new batch because all the stuff we had on hand was so old it had crystallized. Rather than start spraying the stuff on right away, though, the Haffa held out his hand to Luke. May I get some goo, Mr. Myway? The tone was polite, gentlemanly. Why certainly, Sir Phantom. The response matched in tone perfectly as the kid spurted slime from a fingertip directly into Dani's face. Visage scrunched in exaggerated disgust, the superhero wiped the coagulated ectoplasm off as Luke laughed. Come on, Luke, this is serious, another ghost chided, making the magician sigh and hold out a handful of goop. I think I have plenty, thanks, Dani assured, holding up a still-coated glove. The ecto-dejecto was picked up and spritzed across the dirty smear on the Kevlar-lined hazmat. After a moment, the goo's elasticity and rigidity increased, a putty-like consistency overtaking it while it tripled in size. Dani took his glove off and left it to the side. While the group waited 10 minutes to see if there were any negative changes in the treated ectoplasm, the future Fentonworks employee tested another sample from Luke to get a baseline. After, he checked the altered sample, comparing the two and making sure the ecto-dejecto hadn't caused any potentially dangerous flaws at the microscopic level. Seeing none, but being careful, Dani insisted they wait another hour. To Luke's delight, most of it was spent cracking horribly dumb jokes, like how Dani would only call the area they were in a parlor, lounge, foyer, or entertainment space. When asked why, he very flatly said, well, it's not a living room, I'll tell you that much. For the entire duration, the glove remained moisturized by unchanged, healthy ectoplasm. So, Dani misted the air around the mischievous child, and within seconds the ghostling perked up. A minute passed, and he was levitating effortlessly. I can't believe it was that easy. Dani's voice was somewhere halfway between extreme relief and despair. I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? A smug grin accompanied the statement. Dani grabbed 3 more syringes of the miracle medicine and put it on the table. I still want to test anyone having problems to make sure it's safe across the board, but I think I have enough to inoculate everyone who's here. I know some people are gone right now, but this is all I could make on short notice. I'll have my parents work on getting more for you to keep on hand. Dani's voice, cracked with emotion, croaked. Thanks, cuz. I told you your kids would be better in no time. The wink sent her way had Dani wanting to facepalm. Thursday, September 6th, 12:14 p.m. Hey, Mom, I think there's something over there. A middle-aged woman turned the wheel of an oversized SUV with black-gloved hands, following a younger female's pointing finger. The passenger's raised arm swayed, a little charm bracelet tinkling over the fabric of a sweater as the ghost assault vehicle turned and rolled to a stop a foot from the curb. Throwing the gear shift into park and killing the engine, Madeline Fenton jumped up to open a steel-plated door for her daughter, Jasmine, and the two exited onto the sidewalk. Both Team Phantom members held some form of ghost hunting equipment, but neither seemed particularly tense. Jazz carried a scanner in one hand and a collapsed battlesuit in the other. The mechanized outfit was specially made, the designs based off the original Fenton peeler. A futuristic soup thermos clipped to an obsidian-colored belt was all the extra equipment Maddie needed. Flipping the hood of her Swiss Army jumpsuit over a pixie-style haircut, the woman's enhanced welder's goggles slid into place. That's weird. The Fenton finder isn't picking anything up, but there was definitely something on the RV's radar. Jazz studied the handheld gadget, brows furrowed in confusion before glancing at the family's work car. Here, sweetie, let me see. The younger redhead shrugged, handing over the invention. Maddie flipped through the device's menu, switched an ecto signature lock off, and passed it back. Almost immediately, a holographic projection popped up above the device's screen, several dots flashing in the right hemisphere of the line display. It's been malfunctioning lately, but I suppose it has been a while since I gave it a tune-up. What'd you do? The daughter tilted the finder on its side, as if that would make it spill some secret. Oh, I just set it to look for movement within certain temperature ranges, rather than for ectoplasmic energy. It means we won't want to use it unless we've spotted a ghost and are actively tracking it, though. It's next to worthless in this mode, since it picks up both ghosts and living things, Maddie explained. Jazz let the scanner drop to her side, no longer worried about watching the hologram. Well, whatever the gab picked up was in this direction, so we may as well check it out, she mused, and started a leisurely stroll. I still think the theft might have been one of the regulars having a bit of fun. $11.25 in clothes is hardly the heist of the century. It's almost like the ghost was trying to get the cheapest stuff. I've seen bargain basements prices, and believe me, bargain is not a term I'd use. The older Fenton laughed at her own joke, while the younger one just rolled aqua eyes. With all the other things they'd been helping her son with, petty theft was low on Maddie's importance meter. If they were human, I'd profile them as a runaway, Jazz threw in, psychiatrist training peeking through. Or we could just have a tropical plant core on our hands, Maddie countered. Jazz was silent for a moment, mulling her mom's idea over. We are in the middle of a cold front, and today's only supposed to get up to 50 degrees. Maddie reflexively relaxed into the heating elements of her teal suit at the words, and the pair lapsed into companionable silence. The duo turned the corner at the end of the block, approaching the general area the Fenton RV had indicated. Just as Jazz was about to consult the finder, a small feline burst from a secondhand store to their right, a bag of treats in its mouth. The owner came close behind, cussing up a storm. Settling a rapid heart rate, Jazz exhaled a shaky breath. What's up? Cat got your tongue? Maddie teased, with one eyebrow raised. Nope. A giggle escaped Jazz's throat before she could stop it. I was thinking I got the wrong cat burglar. Maddie snorted, then replied dryly. Your brother's rubbing off on us. The woman shook her head, a smile threatening to invade her deadpan expression. Jazz watched the shop owner chase the orange tabby down the sidewalk until movement in the foreground of her vision became too distracting. Behind a spindly ginkgo biloba trunk, a small puff of condensation frosted the air at even intervals. Lifting the scanner, the 22-year-old was unruffled to find a blinking red dot. No foreigner to ghostly interaction, the chipper redhead's finger hovered above the activation button to her mechanical suit. Moving only her eyes, Jazz glanced back and forth between the older Fenton and the tree, catching Maddie's attention. They must have been quiet too long, because the water vapor disappeared. Red-tinted glass gained a slight glow as Maddie turned a dial on the side of her goggles. The world switched to infrared and a rosy figure came into focus behind the tree. It only took a second for the 9th-degree back belt to assess the person. Hips and chest, female. Short and somewhat petite, probably a child or teenager. Shivering in light red in the thermal vision, not a ghost and suffering from the first stages of hypothermia. Standing outside of yet another second-hand shop, likely the thief from Bargain Basement. A pang entered Maddie and maternal instincts flared. Keeping a relaxed posture, the adult pulled off her hood while holding her eyewear in place. Looking slightly less intimidating, she called out a greeting. Hello? The infrared girl tensed, sliding into a posture made for sprinting at a moment's notice. Maddie stood stock still, mouth barely moving and tone switching to one reserved for wild animals. We won't hurt you. We're friendly. Still, the kid didn't speak, but she also didn't run, clearly regarding the two. Beside Maddie, Jazz cut on and slowly lowered to the ground, sitting cross-legged non-threateningly. The child's pose relaxed a hair. Taking a stab in the dark, Maddie asked, Do you need help? Then threw in, We work with Danny Phantom, on a gut feeling. Finally. Phantom? We are his... The adult searched for an appropriate word, finally settling on sidekicks. Sidokiksu. The invisible teen's heavily accented voice was reluctant, bordering on disbelief. Maddie frowned, then asked, Fudan nihongo de hanashite masu ka? Do you usually speak Japanese? There was a heavy pause. Then, Hai, yes. Oh. Maddie changed her frame of mind, reordering her thoughts and thanking her lucky stars she'd kept up on the language. Studying abroad through Honda's robotic internship program, while difficult fresh out of college, had definitely been worth it in the grand scheme of things.
My name is
Fenton Maddie.
This is my daughter.
Jasmine. The elder Fenton gestured slowly to the younger.
We won't hurt you.
Seeing the girl shudder again, very strongly, the ex-ghost hunter stopped, ashamed.
Please wait a second. I'll be right back.
Jazz, honey, can you wait with her for a bit? She's not a ghost and she's scared, Maddie informed her daughter before heading into the store. Inside, the analytic female examined all the displays, beelining for one labeled woman's outerwear. Finding nothing that stood up to a quick inspection, she power-walked to the men's section. Within 2 minutes, the cashier was checking out a heavyweight sweatshirt, ski jacket, sweatpants, and sheepskin slippers. Exiting the store with trepidation, Maddie was relieved to find neither party had moved from their spots. The skittish female's body language seemed softer too, no longer in a fight-or-flight stance. You understand me, but it's nice to meet you. I think my mom already introduced me, but you can call me Jazz. Jasmine pointed to herself at the last word and repeated, Jazz. Maddie smiled from just inside the shop, proud of her daughter's perceptiveness. The sound of the glass door opening made the hidden teen go rigid. Maddie froze, then moved forward again when the kid took a breath, shoulders lowering. The warm clothes heaped in the older female's arms probably had something to do with it.
I bought some clothes. I don't want you to die of cold while talking.
Maddie put the bundle of stuff on the ground a few feet from the girl, then backed off, wishing she could actually read the child's expressions. Her infrared was good, but it wasn't that accurate.
What's your name?
Jasmine stayed quietly to the side, hands tucked beneath her butt non-threateningly.
Thanks.
The higher-pitched words were reluctant but sincere, as the enigmatic Asian pulled the clothes in close, head tilted at an angle that made it obvious Jazz and Maddie were still being watched. Then, failing to answer Maddie's question, she asked,
How can you see me? My glasses have heat looking. I'm an inventor that makes many things.
Although several of the words were strangely phrased, the heart of the conversation was there. Then, when the nameless female still didn't make any moves to dress, Maddie added,
The clothes are safe. They will not harm.
Without speaking, the teen slid on the jacket and slippers, ignoring the sweatshirt and pants for now. Maddie recognized the unwillingness for what it was, an avoidance to any garment that limited sight or mobility when changed into.
So you were part of a small support company, not a sidekick then?
Maddie felt as if the question meant more than she was getting from it, since support company was apparently a katakana phrase now.
There is a long seat across the street if you want to sit while talking. I'm also very hungry and would like lunch from the Thai place by there. I am happy to answer questions, but my understanding is weird. This could be a long time talking.
It was a strained moment before the invisible kid lifted an arm, as if to say, lead the way. When Maddie spoke next, it was courteously slow and even. Jazz, we're gonna head over to that bench to chat. Can you grab us yum-yum? Something hot and filling. Maybe a mild curry for a friend. You know I can always eat pad see ew. Jasmine stood, dusting off the back of her jeans. Sure. The fledgling psychiatrist stayed bright and cheerful as she nodded to the floating ski jacket. I'll even make sure they include 3 pairs of chopsticks. Maddie walked with Jazz across the street, resisting the urge to look back at their guest. It was imperative that the child understand the situation was in her control, that they would make no demands of her. It was clear that the struggling teen had not meant any harm, and Maddie wasn't about to turn away someone in need. Jazz split off, heading into a nearby building, while Maddie branched left, sitting as close to the far end of a solitary bench as could be managed. A dazzling smile illuminated her face when the mysterious girl seated herself on the opposite side. In good faith, Maddie tried to answer the guarded kid's question from earlier.
I know not what support company,
The katakana phrase sounded strange to Maddie's ears.
Means, but my husband and I own
An LLC.
A company.
This time she used the more familiar term kaisha.
Named
Fentonworks.
We make ectotechnology, machines that use
Ectoplasm
to work.
Not having words for everything, the adult had been forced to drop back into English whenever a blank was drawn. For some reason, those words caught the child's attention quicker than anything else, tone going sharp and speech coming fast as the foreigner demanded.
What do you know about ectoplasm?
Maddie's face dropped at the change in attitude, but the woman still clarified.
My jobs are ectobiologist and inventor. I study
Ectoplasm and ghost.
for making machines.
Ectoplasm is
Energy ghosts use to live? No, exist. I do not understand why this question has strong emotion.
Another pause happened, and the scientist wondered if she'd killed the conversation by bringing up her line of work. But then, Gostosu? The phonemes were clearly foreign to the speaker's mouth, causing the extra syllable to ruin the word's enunciation. Peculiar. It was evident the teen knew the word ectoplasm, without ever having heard the term ghost. A big part of the picture to the story was definitely missing. Stuffing down growing curiosity, Maddie went on.
They are not Japanese spirits.
The word yokai just didn't fit.
But like them. Ghosts live in the infinite realms, or as my kids like to call it,
The ghost zone.
That place is a mirror of this world.
Maddie halted, stuck on trying to think of a better way to describe the spectral beings. Eyes widening, she realized there was a simple one. Phantom is a ghost.
You have probably seen others around town also. So these...
The girl slowed, as if rolling something around in her mind. Ghosts.
Are what you call people with abilities. Is that why everyone's afraid of them? Because they're from a different place?
Aha! Some things were starting to make sense. Being a foreigner and having powers that closely mimicked that of a ghost probably made her worried about what Amity's reaction to her would be.
I explained badly.
The infinite realms
is the
afterlife. Maddie made a small groan of frustration in her throat. Then,
the place of death living. Ghosts are the souls of the dead from all worlds.
A small gasp sounded from the far side of the bench, quiet but noticeable. Pinching the top of a petite nose behind her black goggles bridge piece, Maddie tried to ease a building headache. All the strange words made speaking in another language that much more taxing.
That idea is scary for many people, but more scary was when the ghosts came at the beginning. They made big damage and had big fights often. Phantom stopped the fights, telling the bad ghosts to go away and only letting the good ghosts come. In the last couple years,
Amity Park,
this town, made peace with the good ghosts so they can come to have fun or live here. But people who used to have problems with the bad ghosts find living together difficult. If ghosts are so scary, why aren't you afraid?
Of me, was the obvious, unspoken end of the query. The girl shifted in place, waiting.
Good. An easy question.
The Fenton's smile was relieved.
I said before that my family works with Phantom. We are like sidekicks, but more helpful.
The bilingual paused to trace the bottom of her chin lightly, then pointed skyward with a sound of epiphany.
Teammate is a more good word. We make a lot of machines Phantom uses during fights, but we also help with normal things, like his health and taking care of the town. A lot of our time is spent balancing?
Maddie mimed a scale reaching equilibrium.
Between ghosts and humans. Toru Hagakure. What?
The information that seemed to come from nowhere had Maddie blinking twice, worried she'd severely botched the last explanation.
My name is Toru Hagakure,
the teen proclaimed, unfurling the sweatpants from her lap and putting them on, but lifting off the bench to finish the motion. Thursday, September 6th, 1:32 p.m. Hagakure was unsure why she was willing to follow these two redheads home. By all accounts, they were just some random woman with oddly specific equipment for finding invisible people. That was sketchy as all heck, not to mention that they started the conversation with just about the only word that could have made her hear them out. How on earth had they known she was gearing up to find Phantom? Unless they were already stalkers. Everything in the kidnapped girl's mind screamed that they were villains. That them offering help and saying they worked with Phantom was all some elaborate ruse. Her heart said otherwise. There was just something so sincere about them. Every step of the way the older woman, Maddie-san, had done everything right to make Toru feel more comfortable. The invisible teen had nearly fled 3 times during the conversation, but the mother's abject sensitivity to the UA student's needs became an emotional glue bonding her new slippers to the floor. Even when Jazz-san had come bearing coconut-flavored curry, both Fentons had tasted it first, directly where Toru could see, before handing it off. The close-lipped teen had still almost run when the pair offered to let her stay at their house. Normal people didn't do that. The strangers only knew Toru's name, and that she was hungry and lost. It was so suspicious. She herself had learned plenty, if any of the information was to be believed. Quirk users apparently weren't a thing here, nor were there really superheroes. Phantom was quite the oddity, to the point that the rest of the world believed ghosts to be one big hoax. Even knowing that, it had still been very tempting to refuse Jazz and Maddie-san's olive branch. If she hadn't spent the last few days exploring the city, she would have. But too much of what they said, while crazy, sounded somehow plausible when compared to Hagakure's own observations. The new information had definitely put her only solid, long-term game plan of going to the police in a questionable light. Requesting help from another dimension's American government that didn't know anything about quirks had just sounded like a can of worms. She could have continued living by herself outside, but combating the cold was becoming a very serious concern. The dwindling options were what had finally gotten the yes out of Toru. If the Fentons really were working with Phantom, and the Ghost Zone really did connect worlds, staying with them was probably her best bet for getting home. Still in her new, oversized apparel, Toru looked out the window of a vehicle that could only be described as a tank, eyes heavy. The air inside the cabin was outright balmy, as Maddie-san's first order of business upon entering the thing had been to blast the heat. The cloud-gray upholstery, with its excessively soft padding and wonderful back support, were lulling the sleep-deprived girl into micronaps. Every few minutes, Toru would jerk awake from a nightmare, expecting to find some horrific scene. And every time, nothing changed. The gentle whir of the air conditioning system's fans, the only thing moving inside the space. The final time when it happened, she realized the SUV had stopped. Maddie and Jazz were still in their seats, unbuckled now, but patiently waiting for Toru to rouse.
Are you ready to go?
Maddie-san's accent wasn't terrible, but it definitely wasn't great, and it was obvious the woman didn't speak Japanese on the regular. Still, the fact that the older female was trying so hard was part of what was breaking down Hagakure's defenses.
Yes.
The trio piled out, and Toru got a full look at the home they'd parked in front of. For the first time since dropping through the portal, she completely forgot about her worries, for it was not a ground-floor office, top-floor apartment building that stood in front of her like she expected. Eccentrically bizarre was the best way to describe the suburban residence. The federal-style house towered over the street, and not just because its red brick walls had to be at least 40 feet tall. An absolutely gargantuan structure clung to the flat-topped establishment like some ungainly rendition of an alien saucer. Giant steel protrusions stuck out of it every which way. From radio towers to flags, exhaust pipes to satellite dishes, the monstrosity had everything. Even a lone, weather-vane chicken poked from behind one of the support beams that attached the construct to the roof. Then there was the enormous orange and green behemoth of a sign that proclaimed the business's name. Toru's mouth dropped open. How did the family ever get the city to approve this thing's permits? It had to be some kind of safety hazard. Well, at least there was no chance this was some shady location that got overlooked by the local populace. This place was the opposite of anonymous. Yeah, it's a lot, but it's home. The slow words came from Jazz, the simple sentences actually holding meaning for Toru. Maddie, Jazzy Pants, you're home! Toru backpedaled on instinct as a massive male burst through the front door of Fentonworks, the green wood creaking on its hinges. The startled kid didn't even have a chance to run before it became obvious the day-glow orange man had zero interest in her. With the excitement of a golden retriever, the brick of an American practically flew at Maddie, carrying a cardboard box filled with a cobbled-together mass of wire and electronic parts.
I got the Fenton box of booze to work.
The fast-talking, boisterous adult shoved the bundle of glowing parts into what Hagakure could only assume was his wife's hands. That's great, Jack, Maddie congratulated anxiously, throwing a covert glance Hagakure's way, probably making sure she hadn't run. Then, looking down at the jury-rigged package of whatever it was, commented,
I'll help you streamline the design later.
Even though the second sentence had been mostly incomprehensible to Toru, the edge of mirth in Maddie-san's words showed the woman was amused despite herself. Great!
You're the best, Mads.
The man who must be Jack pulled Maddie into a side hug and kissed the much shorter woman's cheek, grinning all the while. Dad!
Calm down. We're trying not to spook our new guest.
Jazz rebuked, exasperation palpable.
There's a new spook?
Jack spun around fast enough to get whiplash, sighting down and rushing Toru in an instant. She'd barely drawn a breath before her arm was being wrenched by a violently enthusiastic handshake. Jack Fenton,
owner of the infamous
Fentonworks. Nice to meet you. Hagakure jerked away. Heart thumping wildly and nerves on high alert, the invisible teen dashed back to the street. When no one chased after, she stopped, turning around to reassess. Jack Fenton was obviously excitable, and Toru did not like being grabbed, but the kicked puppy look spoke volumes. Jazz stood to the side, the skin of her face stretching into the downward pull of her palm. Dad, stop!
She's not even a ghost. This is Toru Hagakure. She's human and needs a place to stay.
Jack, sweetie,
come here and give her some space. She's afraid of people and only speaks
Japanese. Oh. Jack sheepishly grabbed the back of his neck as he ambled toward Maddie. Hagakure's taut posture lowered minutely, then sagged when the childish adult retreated fully.
I'm sorry about my husband, Hagakure-san. He can be a lot sometimes,
Maddie explained, grabbing Jack's arm and holding onto it when the male got close enough.
He means well. It's okay.
Toru's thoughts didn't match her words, but she wasn't about to be rude to the guy for being too nice. Maddie relaxed on Jack's arm, prompting the man to perk back up like a sun-wilted tomato plant getting water.
We should go inside. I can open the hiding bed and get you some warm tea.
Toru sighed. Maddie's acting skills were top-notch if the worry in her body language was faked. Jazz followed Maddie's cue when the older Fenton took point, leading a confused Jack back up the stairs, invention tucked under an arm. As soon as the door opened, the young redhead called into the house.
Dani, we're coming in with a skittish person that needs Phantom's help.
No one could see Hagakure's furrowed brow as she wondered just why Phantom's name had been emphasized. Swallowing trepidation once again, Toru trailed after them and into a surprisingly normal front room. Well, at least what she assumed was normal for American-style houses. There was an awful lot of purple, and the gray section on the right had this weirdly circular recession in the floor. But otherwise, the kitchen visible on the far side of the room was fairly basic, and the plain staircase on the left seemed to only lead to bedrooms and a bathroom. Hagakure nearly tripped on the welcome mat when she spotted a raven-like young man staring at her with piercing blue eyes. She could have sworn the male hadn't been perched on the foyer's curved couch a moment ago. It was unnerving. The TV was off and the room was bare, so why was he even there? The UA student had noticed the boy pull a small cloth pinched between two circles of wood from behind him and almost chuckled at the absurdity. She'd been afraid of a guy doing needlepoint in his spare time. Then, the giant pumpkin-like man in front of her bellowed,
"Dano, this here is
"Teru Hagakure!
Come say hello!"
It was all Toru could take. A fit of hysterical giggles overtook her, which quickly escalated to roaring laughter while all the Fentons exchanged sidelong glances.
Are you okay?
Maddie asked, head tilting to the side like a bird, while the young man from the couch came closer, footsteps silent.
I think I will be. Things have just been rough these last few days. I guess I needed some stress relief,
Toru answered offhandedly.
If you believe so, just talk to me if you are needing,
the mom entreated.
Thanks. I do mean it.
Arigato.
That means
Thank you, right? It was the first time the younger male spoke, his voice surprisingly smooth and middle-toned. Hagakure had expected it to have more bass, with the guy being close to Shoji and Sato-kun in height. The American held out a hand, arm relaxed and waiting with a pleasantly warm smile on his face.
My name's Dani. As you probably already guessed, I'm part of the family.
All the English was making Toru's head spin, so only some of the words made any sense, but she did appreciate that the handshake was not forced this time. Dani, Toru Hagakure-san, is Japanese
and doesn't speak any English at all, but if you want to be polite, you can bow in greeting.
Dani angled toward his mom as she spoke, eyes training on her mouth when the correct way to say Hagakure was emphasized. Oh, whoops. Dani turned back to the invisible teen, dipping at the waist with a loose fist in front of his stomach and one behind his back in a distinctly Western bow. Then, speaking slowly, tried again. Konnichiwa. My name is Dani Fenton. Nice to meet you, Toru. A sharp inhale came from Maddie, making Dani's head swivel. What'd I do? The words were fast, panicked. Toru thanked Kami-sama that no one could see her blush. She was already embarrassed enough. In Japan,
it's traditional to call someone by their last name and use honorifics to denote familiarity, like
san, sama, kun, and chan.
Using someone's first name at all shows closeness. Using someone's first name without a suffix attached, well...
Maddie trailed off awkwardly. The boy groaned, apologizing profusely. Chapter notes. So I wanted to start by apologizing for my awful accents. I know they're terrible. Hikari means light in Japanese and is a very common first name, according to Google. The part was just to establish that the school is stepping up with their students, trying to take better measures to care for them. Tucker technically doesn't have to go to college. He's just doing like one class a quarter to spend more time with Dani. He has his own IT business and is doing well. This story takes place roughly in 2014 on Dani's side. I'm not going to try and make the time hard set because I don't want to constantly be looking up when did such and such become popular. I've actually looked up every plant I have included to make sure they're all reasonable plants to grow in Illinois and that the settings I put them in are accurate. I actually really liked the scene where Toru watched the video. It was another unplanned scene, but it just felt like there was too much of a leap in logic for Toru's actions without it. The island with plants and flowers in the Lost Home scene is the gardener's lair. I decided that Dani, while keeping her name, would have gone all ice core on her costume design once her ice powers developed, making her phantom form significantly more unique. I have a picture I did with the alterations on it for reference, but I can't post it because of copyright infringement. The balloon on a string thing has me imagining Drifloon every time. The Lost Home was originally going to have Victorian architecture, but then I just loved the idea of it being basically Vikings home from Lake Tahoe, California. That place is freaking cool if you've never been. I recommend looking up pictures to really set the scene in your mind. Yes, this was my favorite scene of the story so far. I had not planned on Luke Myway's name, but oh Nelly, I love it. It can't be that easy, can it? Is a reference to Into the Spider-Verse. Fall 7 times, stand up 8 is a Japanese idiom about resilience. In this fic, Jack and Maddie have known about Dani's powers for several years. Ginkgo trees, also known as maidenhairs, are super pretty and turn bright yellow in the fall. Their leaves look like little fans. Yokai are the traditional Japanese spirit monsters in Japanese mythology. To be honest, they're actually really similar to ghosts in a lot of ways, but don't traditionally have anything scientific backing up their existence like the phantom lore does for ghosts. I'm kind of in the mindset that a yokai is a kind of ghost, but a ghost is not necessarily a yokai, like subspecies that got isolated to Asian areas. Tomato plants are notoriously dramatic. They wilt and fluff up at the drop of a hat. The box of booze is a creation that Lurius1533 came up with. It is a device for communicating with shades and other smaller ghosts, similar to the ghost gabber. It's different in that it is a translation device that doesn't just say words and then say fear me. It actually makes the sounds lesser ghosts make to communicate with them, since in this universe there are sounds that cannot be replicated by a human throat correctly. It'd sound the same on the human side, but not on the ghosts. This is a random tangent fleshed out, by the way. You can bet your bottom that the box ghost would love to steal it. Dani really only knows things like thank you and hello and stuff in Japanese. Not really his thing. The premise behind the scene with Dani is that he wasn't actually in the living room. He heard Jazz yell and dropped in invisibly and intangibly while Toru was distracted. Then noticed Hagakure's panic and picked up Jack's needlepoint that he leaves on the couch sometimes, just to seem like he had a reason to be